everybody, welcome back to Bentley House. I'm Aira, and today I'm going to be racing my 3D printer. I know a lot of you have known that I've had a 3D printer. I haven't talked a lot about it because I've been spending time learning about it, learning about setting up files and how to use the printer, and this still is not going to be a how-to video because I'm still learning. My husband knows way more than I do, so he helps out a lot. But I am going to talk about the benefits and the drawbacks to a 3D printer from a miniaturist standpoint. And I thought the most fun way to do that would be for me to actually race the 3D printer. So my idea is that the 3D printer will print something and I will make the same thing by hand. We'll see who finishes first and whose item looks the best. So before we get started, I will talk just a little bit about what kind of printer this is. This is a Kudo 3D Bean. That's the name of it, it's a bean. So we'll just call him Bean. And next, if you can hear just a little bit of like a sound in the background, that is my air filter, which we didn't originally know we were going to have to purchase, but that is one thing I want to let you guys know up front. This was a very expensive air filter that actually ended up costing more than the printer itself, so that is one thing to consider, is how you're going to protect yourself and your family if you are using a 3D resin printer like the Kudo 3D. Usually the plate starts right about here, and I already lowered it down so it's sitting inside the resin vat. I will try and give you a better look at what that looks like, but we actually will not be able to see if anything is even printing correctly until about 3 hours in. By then, hopefully I have a substantial amount of work done on my miniature, but I'm really hoping this works. This is the print plate. The plate itself is actually inside the resin. This is white resin inside of a vat. There is a very tiny screen at the bottom of here that emits UV light that will freeze each layer. So it's essentially printing upside down and coming out the top as it prints. So you will be able to see that, hopefully, if the print is successful. But this is a little up close look at our 3D printer. It is not printing anything yet, but I will go ahead and get it started. Before I start it up, I guess I should tell you what we are making. I am going to be making a little chest that opens for the captain's quarters. I am using a file that I found online. This is not my personal file that I made, so if you're interested in finding this print file for your own uses, I'll put it in the description box below so you can find it. And my chest that I'm making myself, I'm just gonna make up as I go. I have not planned this out. I kind of have an idea of what I want it to look like, but once I hit go, I'm just gonna have to kind of make it up as I create. Here is my print file all set up, ready to go. And I have it in, like I said, I'm not gonna show you exactly how I set this all up, or in reality how my husband set this all up, but I did want to show you kind of what it looks like. This is going to show me each layer as it's being printed. Unfortunately, it does not tell me an estimated total time, so I have no idea how much time I have to create my own miniature. So hopefully once I hit this button right here, print, it's going to pop up my estimated time and I will know. And once I get started, it's not going to match up completely. Once I get started, I'm going to set a timer on myself so that you can see how long it's taken me. I'm not going to hit stop or anything on my timer. If I need to eat lunch or go to the restroom, I'm not going to hit stop. We'll just see how long it takes a human being to make a miniature, even though human beings have to take breaks and printers do not. So here we go. I'm going to hit the print file right here and hopefully an estimated total time will pop up here. Start printing, proceed. Okay, wow, we have 14 hours. Is that right? Oh my goodness. Okay, I'm not so nervous anymore here. But as you can see, these are all the supports that are going to hold up the 3D print. And it kind of holds it up off of the print screen. So that's what you're looking at here. I will show you what the original file looks like, and of course you'll see it once it comes off the printer. So what these little dots are kind of makes a little bit more sense. But I think I'll go ahead and get started on making my miniature. As I create this miniature, I want to, of course, give the steps that I'm going through, but also I want to talk about the 3D printer. So if I miss anything I think is important information, I will put it as text on the screen. I'm going to be making my miniature out of mat board and cardstock, and so there are going to be very different materials, which is very interesting because resin is like a hardened plastic and I am using paper, so I already imagine they're going to be very different weights as well. I am cutting out pieces to create the bottom of the chest and the top. The print file has a rounded top, but my chest is going to have a flat top. I will put the picture of what I'm creating up on the screen. And also, I know that I am writing the dimensions of each piece on there now, but my handwriting is kind of not the best. So I will also put a picture of each piece with the typed out dimensions in a link below. So if you're interested in making something similar to this, you can get the dimensions that I used. As always, when starting a project like this, I make sure I have a really sharp blade so that my sides and my cuts and pieces are really sharp. That always makes it easier to glue together in the end. It really ends up taking me only about 20 minutes to cut out most of my base pieces for this. So I really felt at this point really confident that I was going to be okay, but a lot of time in miniatures comes in when you're doing the finishing, when you're doing the detail pieces. If you're just building a box, that really doesn't take that much time, and that's why I thought building a chest would be a really good test of the 3D printer versus an artist making something by hand because of the simpler shapes. So now that I have all my pieces cut out, I'm going to go ahead and glue them together with tacky glue and just make sure that everything fits. One thing that can be a drawback when you're doing something by hand is that you may not cut everything perfectly. So I think the 3D printer has that advantage that everything should already be in the print file, and as long as the print file goes well, it should build everything correctly. But when you do things by hand, sometimes you can mess them up a little bit. And I've done that many times where I've had to recut a piece. So luckily, I think I cut these guys pretty straight. I was using a ruler and a very new blade, so everything went pretty smoothly. I did have one piece that I had to recut, but that was just one piece, so it wasn't too bad. The measurement that I wrote on there was correct, but I cut it wrong. So don't feel like the measurement was wrong. I just, it's human error when you're making something by hand. So here's all the pieces put together, and at this point I just want to double check that the top edges and the bottom edges all line up, so when the trunk is opening and closing, it looks like it is the proper size lid for the proper size bottom. And so far I'm thinking it's looking good, and we're about 36 minutes in. So while the chest dries, I decided to go outside for a little bit, and I don't feel super intimidated by the print time. So I was feeling like I was just going to get up and rush to get it done, because I was thinking the print time was going to be like 6 to 8 hours, but anyway, I don't want to get too cocky and then life happen and me not be able to get it done. But I do need to go outside and spend time with my new little studio mate here. This is Stormy. We adopted her this summer, so I of course have to give my little buddy some attention, and yeah, so we're just gonna hang outside for a little bit while the chest dries, and then we will be back inside. So I'm back at it a little after an hour into the build, with a snack, of course, and I'm going to use some sandpaper to sand down the sides of the trunk. This is really important because sometimes, as much as you try your hardest to cut the edges straight, sanding does always seem to help just smooth everything out. Now what I'm going to be doing is making some longer pieces that are going to be on the inside of the lid. And what this is going to do is create a lip on the inside so that when my trunk closes, it snugly closes and it doesn't just kind of, instead of like it being like a clamshell closing where just the outer sides are touching, it's going to have this inner edge that's going to keep it snugly closed. And I'm going to put that around the 3 sides of the lid, and this piece is just a 1/16 inch wider than the original pieces. I didn't put it on the picture, but if you just cut pieces that are about 1/16 inch wider than the original lid pieces, they should fit inside and give you that little lip effect. Now I'm making some pieces that are 3/16 inch, and I'm going to be cutting these to length. These are going to be making the long strips of wood that go on the top of the chest, and that's a very distinct feature of this kind of chest. They were to support and just kind of strengthen the top of the chest while it was being moved on and off of ships. So I want to make sure that I get that in there. And these I'm just gluing on with tacky glue. I'm just kind of eyeballing everything to get it to the right spot where I think it should be based on the photo. I'm not measuring anything specifically, except for the side pieces that I first cut. Right now, when I'm putting these pieces on, I'm just kind of putting each piece on, deciding where it needs to go so that it looks right. And I'm putting these on the side of the bottom part of the trunk because that part needs to be supported as well. So I have them on the top and then all around the bottom. And at this time I'm about 1 hour and 45 minutes in, and I have a pretty good base part of my trunk done. And again, I'm going to sand everything down to give it that nice worn look. I have to take a quick break now to empty my video card because it has gotten full, and so that's gonna set me back on time just a little bit, but again, I'm not super worried yet. I do want to show you the printer screen now. We are on layer 169. I still cannot see if there is anything on the printer plate, if that has been successful. So as soon as I can see that, I will share it with you guys. But let me show you the screen so you can kind of see what layer we are printing now. You can kind of see the ridges in the chest that the 3D printer is currently printing. Like I said, now we're on layer 170. And in just a second, it's going to show you what setting it is currently printing, or what layer it's printing. So you can see the curved top of the chest, you can see some of the ridges, and I know it still looks kind of like a crazy mess. All those little dots are supports. Hopefully it's attached to the plate, so we'll see in maybe another hour or so, but I'll check back then. At this point, I've completed all of the pieces of the chest that need to be made from mat board, so I'm moving on to my scrap piece of cardstock, and I'm going to be creating some pieces that are going to look like the metal hinges. Well, they're not really, I'm not making hinges yet. They're the pieces that basically hold all of the wood together. What are those called? Brackets. We're making metal brackets. I'm going to be cutting, I believe this piece was about 3/16 inch wide. Again, it was the same width as the top of the trunk, or like the side of the trunk. Really, again, I'm just eyeballing this a little bit. I'm just trying to make sure that it fits the, it just needs to fit on the wood so it looks like a piece of metal they would have used as a bracket. So I'm sorry I'm not being super exact in my measurements. This is kind of how I do things when I'm in a rush, I guess, and I just kind of make sure that they look right, and I just go for it. So I put them on all four corners and then on either side of the middle pieces of the wood supports. Now I'm also going to do this for the bottom part of the trunk. There is a little bit of a different support because I have all that wide open space at the top, and so I'm putting a rectangular bracket. I said support, I meant bracket. I'm putting kind of a rectangular bracket up there, and here's how it looks. You can kind of do this different ways. It doesn't look exactly like it does in the picture, but again, I'm just going for a look that I like. After lunch, I came back with some more snacks to keep up my miniature making energy. And we are about 3 hours in, but I did check the plate and we could not quite see exactly what's on there yet. So instead, I'm going to continue on with my make. And I'm grabbing some different sized circle punches. This is a regular hole punch size. And what I'm creating now is the little locking mechanism on the front of the trunk. I used the regular size hole punch first, and then I'm taking one that's just a slightly bigger, and I'm going to hole punch it again to get this little small circle that's going to go on the very top part of the lid. And I actually cut 2 of these and then glued them on top of each other to make it just a little bit thicker. Now to make the locking part that goes underneath, or that is like has the hinge on it where it flips up and locks onto the top of the lid, I have this bell-shaped punch, and I cut out a couple different circle sizes, and I'm going to use this and glue it together just like this. It kind of looks like a medal or a medallion, but it is going to end up looking like the bottom part of my trunk latch. And these eventually are going to get painted with a metallic finish, so they are going to look like metal. The corners of the lid need to have kind of a little decorative, I don't know, you call it a bracket, or is it's kind of like a clamped on bracket type look to it. But I had this maple leaf punch, and I thought this would work really well for that look. So all I did was add some glue to the very corner. I pushed the point of the leaf down, pointing towards the inside of the lid, and then I pushed the sides of the leaf over the edge so that it looks like it's on the very corner parts of the lid. So at about 3.5 hours in, we are ready to paint. I am going to put a base coat of black all over this guy, and then I am going to put brown on top of that. If you saw my original inspiration picture, usually it's a very, very dark wood or a very aged look to the wood. So that's definitely what I want to achieve here. So it's about 4 hours into my miniature build, a little bit past 4 hours, and I think that's going to be a way better time to show you things attached to the build plate. As you can see, it's still not really coming up that far above the little tank that holds all the resin. So I'm going to try and show you that things are stuck on the bottom of the plate. So something's printing. I don't know if it's printing correctly yet, but something is printing. So I'll try and give you a close-up of that. So as you can see, there are little supports in there, and it is attached to the build plate. And it goes down. When you hear that little click, it means that it is doing another layer. It is cooking or curing the UV resin to create one more layer. So now that we can see that at least something's there, I don't know if it's printing correctly yet, but something's attached. And Stormy's not happy. I always kick her out if I'm messing with the resin printer so that she can stay safe, because she doesn't need to have anything to do with these products in case anything drips or spills, which I'm not touching it, so it shouldn't, but better safe than sorry. That is one thing that you really want to consider if you are thinking about a resin printer, is where you are going to put it. I know I mentioned earlier about ventilation, which is very important, and definitely research that before you purchase, but you also want to make sure that you have a safe space to put it in, that no pets or children can get to your printer or can get to your supplies, because they can be harmful if they get into them. So just keep that in mind if you are thinking about something like this. Now I'm using a lighter brown to just make a light touch of a wood grain on top of the black. I'm not painting it solid brown because I do want some of that black to show through, and it does give more of a wood grain texture. And I'm going to go ahead and paint over any of my bracket details that I put on there, because I'm going to be painting them after the entire thing is painted with a layer of brown. I'm going to be doing my regular way that I paint something that I want to be silver metallic, which is where I first put a layer of flat gray, and then I go back and add the silver metallic on top of it. Usually metallic paints are very transparent, so if you don't do this step first, your silver will not show up very well. I'm going to do this on any pieces that are supposed to represent metal on my trunk. All these steps I'm doing now to paint my own miniature are all steps that I will still have to do on my resin print once it comes off the printer. That's one thing that technology has not really caught up with yet. It's going to come off in one color, whatever the resin is that you chose to print it in, that's the color that it comes off in. So you still need to paint and prep and finish your miniature even if you're using the 3D printer. Now on this miniature, I'm going to be aging the metal pieces in the same way I usually do, where I take some watered down black paint and I just kind of let that flow on top of the silver paint. This gives it more of an aged look. I'm not trying to age this too much. I don't want this to be abandoned coffee shop type of aging, but I do want it to look like it has been a used trunk, so that's why I'm adding just a little bit of that watered down black to each of the hinges. At this point, I'm about 5 hours in, and this would probably be where I would maybe take a break. By the way, what I'm doing right now is I'm just taking a really sharp tool and I'm pushing little spots in on the hinged pieces. This is going to make it look like it has very tiny nail heads sticking through the metal. Like I was saying, this is probably a place where I would stop and take a break, but I'm definitely going to be pushing through this because I am in a race, obviously, and 5 hours of working straight on a miniature is a little bit exhausting. I'm sure you guys have been there. Right now, I'm going to be adding some handles onto the side of the trunk. And of course I'm using paper again, and I'm going to kind of bend and move the paper around to break up some of the paper fibers, and this is going to help me make it look like a leather handle. It's going to help me bend it and shape it so that it looks like it has some weight to it, and it's going to hang down slightly on the side of the chest. Again, I'm just kind of eyeballing the measurement on this so that it fits on the side. I'm going to be painting this a light brown, very similar to the brown that I used. I think it's the same paint as the brown I used on the outside of the trunk, and I painted the inside of the handle before I glued it on. Just makes it a little bit easier. I just make it into a horseshoe shape and then glue the two edges to the side, and then I'm going to go back and paint the rest of it in that brown paint to make it look like leather. And I think I also add a little bit of the watered down black to make it look like several hands have carried it over the years. Now I'm using the same exact maple leaf looking punch to create the little metal pieces that are going on either side of the handle, and I cut the little leaf stem off, and then I'm going to glue them on top of either side of the handle so that they look like this. And then I am going to just paint them with silver, with the gray and silver technique that I did for all the rest of the hinges, so this will look like metal pieces holding on leather handles. So I'm about 5.5 hours into this race, and this is what I have so far, which I am liking at the moment. And really the only thing left to do are the hinges. I was really hoping to make some real functioning hinges because the printer, I think the file has real functioning hinges. So that's really all I have left to do. The printer says it has 9 hours left. So I should be able to make hinges within 9 hours. However, I have children. So, and they have a dentist appointment today. I'm gonna try and do as much as I can in the next hour or so. And then we have to go to the dentist. And I may still have time because that means they probably won't be done printing until later tonight, which is good. So I'm feeling good about winning this. However, I have real life chores to do and the printer doesn't. So this could be kind of a tortoise and the hare type situation where, you know, I'm going really fast, but I've got other things to do and the tortoise might win. But like I said, I'm going to buckle down, focus on those hinges, and see if I can get them done. And this is what the print file looks like right now. You can see up there on the left, about 9 hours remaining. It's on layer 625, and this is what the layer looks like. So that's the top of the chest and the bottom, I think. So hopefully it's still printing well. So I want to make these hinges as simple as possible, but I also don't want to be shown up by the printer. So I'm going to make some functioning hinges the best I can. I've never made them this way before, but we're just going to go for it. So I'm going to be using a paper clip and again some thin strips of cardstock, and I'm just cutting off some straight pieces of the paper clip. They're about a 1/2 inch wide, or a little bit wider than a 1/2 inch. And on one end I'm going to add some gel super glue, and I'm just going to bend over one piece of the cardstock and hold it in place until the glue really grabs hold of the cardstock. And I didn't fold it over very evenly, but that's okay because I'm going to be cutting it into a shape anyway. Once it's set up, I'm just going to cut it a little bit shorter and then hold it up to my chest and see how short it needs to be. Again, I'm kind of eyeballing this to see what I think looks best. I'm making 2 of these because I plan on having 2 hinges on the lid so that it's a little bit more supported. Once I have that cut to the size that I want, I'm going to take some super glue and I'm going to channel my inner Heather Tracy, and I'm going to cover it with super glue to harden that piece so that I know that it's not going to break or rip or tear. Now I'm just going to cut it a little bit shorter. I wanted a longer paperclip piece for a while until I was sure what I was doing. Then I'm going to cut it a little bit shorter. I think it's maybe about double the size of the paper piece. And I'm using tacky glue to tack it onto the bottom part of the chest. And I'm making sure that the paper clip lines up with the crack that's between the bottom part of the chest and the lid. And then I'm just going to wait for that to dry. Actually, I'm going to put the other piece on too and wait for those to dry before I do anything else, because I just want to make sure that there's a really good connection for these hinges, especially if it's something that you're going to be opening and closing a lot. You want to make sure that your hinges are really strong. Mine probably won't be opened and closed that much. For the other part of the hinge, obviously I've made half of each hinge. Now I'm making the other half. I'm going to fold it over a paper clip that does not have glue on it, and it's going to make this little bitty loop, and I'm going to glue the paper together, making sure that there's no glue inside the loop. Once that's done, I'm going to rubber band my chest together so that I know that the 2 pieces will not shift or move while I'm doing this. and that piece that I made with the loop should fit over the paper clip so that it so it just fits over it, and that will be what allows it to move. And then I cut that piece again just like I did the bottom pieces so that it fit on the lid, and I just gave it a little bit of a shape with that pointed arch. And then I'm going to put those on with tacky glue and let them dry, leaving the rubber band wrapped around it so nothing shifts while the hinges are drying. And then of course I painted them with the same metallic type paint process that I used for the rest of the metal pieces. And this is just a really simple hinge. It's actually not permanent because you can unhinge it and take the lid off. This is a little bit easier way to paint it, but I'm sure you could I'm sure there's a way where you could do like a triple hinge to make it a little bit more secure. This is just the way I decided to do it because I know this piece won't be handled very much, but I definitely didn't want the 3D printer showing me up with an actual hinged top, and so anyway, I had to make one, and this is what I came up with. I hope you guys like it, or maybe it's helpful to you. That would be awesome. So now we're going to stop our timer. Yay! I just stopped my timer at a little over 6.5 hours, and it looks like the printer still has 8 hours and 6 minutes left. It's currently on layer 732, so I will go run some errands, and I'll real quickly show you what I can see on the print plate. I think if the print had been the original 6 to 8 hours like I thought, I would have been a lot more pressured and a lot more nervous about not winning this one, but it'll be interesting to see how this guy turns out, and I will show you that a little bit later when the print is finished. It's about 10 p.m. at night. Printer is still going strong. What did we say we're going to call him? Bean. Bean is still going strong. After I finished my miniature, I got the kids to the dentist, came back home, fed the family, got the kids to bed, cleaned up my office. I'm about to go make lunches, but yeah, we still have about an hour and a half left for the printer. Feeling tired, worn out at the end of the day, but I will stay up until the print is done, and then I need to put it into some isopropyl alcohol to clean off the print, and I'll show you a picture of that. I'm going to be way past anything that I want to look like on camera at that point, so I'll just show you what that looks like in like a photo or a quick video. And then tomorrow I will be finishing off the 3D print because obviously it's not going to look like a chest until I paint it. So I will be back tomorrow and I will show you what the print looks like, and I'll probably time how long it takes me to paint it so you guys can kind of factor in that paint process time as well. So here are my few last thoughts for you guys on 3D printers. They can be great sidekicks and make really awesome miniatures, but I don't feel like they're a necessary thing. Also, there's a lot of cost involved in the machine itself, ventilation, and materials to create the prints. There's also an environmental responsibility for you to clean things up correctly. We've done extensive research into that, come up with our own process of cleaning up the materials and making sure that we're not putting anything dangerous into the water system or into trash that it's not supposed to go into. And so there's all of that to consider. Another thing that you might want to consider is that if you're not willing to learn a 3D design program, you're kind of limited to the items that you can create. You're limited to things that other people have made, and that's pretty much all you can print unless you're willing to learn that program, which I'm hoping to learn soon. Here I wanted to show you the supports on the items. This helps keep the items connected to the plate. The reason they can't just print flat on the plate is because it will create suction and the items will come off. Believe me, we have gone through that process several times of learning that lesson, and it's a huge bummer to see that something you've been printing for 3 or 4 hours has not worked. You can also see that sometimes these supports, if you don't get them on there correctly, can mar your print. I had to actually sand this guy pretty heavily with sandpaper and my Dremel. I went outside to do that because of the supports, and I still have some supports on the inside that are hard to get out, so I'm just going to leave them in there. So there's still a lot of things that we are learning, and it all comes into, like, first you have to learn how the printer works, you have to learn how to clean up after the printer, how to store things correctly, then you have to learn how to set up the 3D files, and then in the very end you have to learn how to finish off the miniatures so that they can be usable. And so this resin that we're using, I'll leave a link to it in the description if you already have a 3D printer, but I have found that this resin is the easiest to paint, and I really like, and it's actually a little bit cheaper. So if you do have a 3D resin printer and you want to try it out, I do like this resin that we're using. So I ended up painting that chest the same exact way that I painted my other one, so it could be kind of a fair comparison. And then I sprayed both of them with a matte finish, and now I'm just trying to finish off the hinge at the hinge that was created in the print. So I'm just using a wire to go through that hinge. Now there is quite a weight difference. If you held them in your hand, you could definitely tell which one was the 3D print. I'm gonna put some stats, some final time stats up on the screen right now, so you can kind of get a feel for what I guess to figure out who won the race. My final time was 6.5 hours from start to finish for my miniature, and the 3D printer was 14 hours for printing, 90 minutes to cure it in a UV light. It was an hour and a half to remove the supports and sand it, and then it was another 2 hours of painting and drying time. So the 3D printer's total time was about 19 hours. So this is why I say that it is a good sidekick to have running in the background, but I think for me, I'm going to be making most of my miniatures still by hand. I have printed some really cool stuff off the printer, don't get me wrong, but don't knock making things by hand, because you can still really get some cool results in a little bit less time if you're just sitting there waiting for a 3D printer to print. So let me know in the comments who won. Who do you guys think won, both in quality and time? And let me know if you've been thinking about a resin printer or any kind of printer, or if you think you're just going to stick to making things by hand. I hope you guys really enjoyed this video. I hope you would like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!